Welcome to another episode. It's always quite a shock, isn't it? Welcome to another episode of the Animal Rights Show. We have a special
It's the
episode.
world. It's the world out there. It's the world.
This is our chance.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a
Hello,
whole new pilot,
planet Earth. Hello, planet Earth.
which begs the question, where is Roger if he's saying hello to planet Earth?
Oh yeah, that's cool.
We've gone off the rails already.
Hello, Earthlings.
Yeah, the whole idea with this episode is to start a whole new series. Roger and I, we've been working. We're disagreeing already.
Yeah, we're having a debate.
It's on. But yeah, I mean, we've been working together 6 or 7 months already, and more kind of full on with the show. And I think we've identified a few topics that I think we largely agree with, but don't necessarily align fully on. And the whole idea with this new series is to kind of explore them more in depth from multiple angles and a bit more of a long form discussion, and maybe even hold each other's feet to the fire a bit if we feel so inclined, if we feel like there's something that needs to be challenged.
Yeah, I think working together might be stretching it, but there you go. Hey,
Working together, working against each other.
UK vegan family, hello.
Yeah, so if you are joining us, let us know in the chat. There's a vegan person. And also Nikki has joined us. So as we get into it, we'll pull in as many comments as we can. The topic today's chat really, though, is social media. I think as animal advocates, especially through the lockdown, we've had to rely on social media. I know I found myself gravitating more towards it myself. And I think the focus of today's conversation is going to be really on text-based threads, which I appreciate you and I both have a fair bit of experience with, and probably a lot of those watching and with us have been engaged in threads as well. But yeah, I mean, if we go ahead and just start it off, maybe it's good to start with what we agree with. I think we both agree there's a place for social media advocacy.
That's a terrible place to start, that one. Hello, Terry. Hello, Nikki.
And Vegan Pixie Warrior. And yeah, I think the whole thing with this is, I think as with any level of advocacy, we all have to figure out what works best for us. I know I started out being pretty heavy into the text-based advocacy. And specifically, if anyone's familiar with the whole vegan versus meat eater debate groups, which I know Roger's dabbled in as well. And I think what we'd like to tease out today is really where our time is best spent and at what point to disengage. So with that, I mean, what do you think text threads play a role within the movement, both inside and outside of the movement, Roger? How would you approach them if you saw a new thread come up and there's something that you disagree with?
Yeah, well, my general position has been the same for quite a few years, in the sense that I often engage with, text-based conversations, thinking about the audience that is watching rather than the person you're talking to. Sometimes, in fact, I'll carry on talking to a person who's kind of a waste of time, and is kind of not getting it, or is being offensive because of this audience idea, really. And so I always have the audience in mind, and particularly now, in the sense that I complain about people not knowing the history of the movement, and I suppose for people in the 21st century, they gain the history of the movement by watching YouTube, but also by reading through comment threads. And so if you are, as it were, not present in order to give people, a fresh perspective, then, they're, as it were, at the mercy of whoever's left there. So I tend to think it's almost an obligation a little bit, I suppose, to engage, just to give people a chance to kind of see things like, for example, burst bubbles like the vegan movement was started in the 1990s, which, some people would claim, those kind of things. Those kind of myths in the movement need to be challenged, and so who's going to do it? Well, it's going to be the people who've been around for a bit, I suppose.
Yeah, and UK Vegan Families just echoed those thoughts around how social media is important to us and how we can raise awareness, about, all animals, and it's how we are currently doing outreach. It's how we are educating others about veganism.
Yeah, but I mean, we want to talk about that, though, don't we? I mean, I don't know whether right now, but we certainly want to talk about that, in the sense that when you're on social media, who are you actually talking to? I think that's a very important point.
that, and yeah, I think first I'd like to tease out this social media thread. So I think compared to those who are familiar with our Sunday show, I think we might get a bit more granular with this one, because I'm curious, at what point do you choose to disengage with the thread? Because I'll give you a second to ponder that question as I share kind of my thoughts on it, because I moved from being very proactive and reaching out, and if somebody responds, I respond quite quickly, to actually taking a step back. And a few tricks that I found work well for me are only responding once or twice a day, because I find when there's a rapid chain of responses, that's when emotions can get heightened. So it's also nice for me to just be able to disconnect, because I think if we look more broadly, the tweet you shared with me this morning, Roger, what are we actually getting from social media? And is it actually, draining us more than it's helping us? I think there's some things to be considered there too. So, all right, we've got this thread where someone's challenging an opinion you feel strongly against. For instance, that the vegan movement started in the 1990s. At what point would you choose to take a step back and say, this is no longer worth my energy?
Yeah, well, again, it depends on what I kind of assess is, the strength of the audience, and who might be there and who's liable to be reading along, and especially if they're commenting now and again. And so it depends on that. I mean, if you feel as though you've really reached a dead end, then obviously you would move on. But that would be the same as an interview on the street, wouldn't it? So you're kind of I mean, we're social animals. We can pick up on body language. It's more difficult, obviously, on social media, because that's absent. And in fact, that's one of the issues about social media. People probably talk to each other in ways that they just wouldn't do, even if they disagree with each other, if they were sat across a table. And so, social media has got quite a lot of limits, but it's kind of also what we're stuck with, certainly in the kind of a lockdown situation. So it's important. We need to use it. I think we need to use it as a tool.
Yeah, and I think that's a huge point, is to try to interact as if we were sitting across the table from the person, because I know I've seen it almost becomes like a form of entertainment, or things are said out of more venting than advocating, when that could be a real opportunity to bring some around to the respecting other animals. I mean, here from Vegan Pixie Warriors pointing out that they have a few friends that have gone vegan from my posts on Facebook. And I know I have as well, at least people who message me and say, hey, I'm thinking about this now, thanks to your post. I just wanted to let you know I don't interact with them a lot, but I do keep an eye on them. So I think maybe I'd initially flagged this as one that we could have. It's maybe good to have a warm-up one for our first, debates with Hess and Yates, but maybe we align more than we thought. I guess my thought is some of those threads that are just that you can see right off the bat they're closed-minded. I might not engage with those at all these days. I mean, I appreciate the audience critique. However, yeah, I guess we've got to choose where to.
Yeah, the thing is that if you're assuming that you're interacting with one person, you're interlocutor, as it were, but there might be 10 people watching, so that's 10 people who are being educated about movement issues. Hello, Jennifer. But that's important. In the sense that especially if we know there's quite a lot of young people joining the movement all the time. Well, that could be their first engagement with, let's go on this thing and see what I can learn. Okay, and if they're just getting garbage and you're not there to give a balanced view, then, as I said, they're kind of at the mercy then, and they would start their journey into the movement with a completely distorted view about what everything is. It could be animal rights, it could be veganism. For example, I made a comment this morning, and you do have to be diplomatic. It's about communication skills. We ought to be aware of that, as you say. Kind of imagine you're just with that person. How would you frame it? And so recipient design is very important in that sense. But there was a video, and the focus was grass-fed beef and factory farming. And I just kind of said, well, hey guys, we've got to be more aware of the rights position, because those things are irrelevant to the rights position. And I just wanted to throw that in there, because if I didn't comment in that particular place, that point would never be made. So it is important.
Yeah, and I guess we're kind of to just to clarify, it sounds like we're talking about two different things because I think my focus is more outside of the movement and building vegan awareness in general versus it
I'm
seems
talking
like
about
your
three different
focus.
things myself. But there you go.
Well, I'm talking about four different things.
Yeah. No, no, you're not.
Well,
Well,
and I
that
think
brings us on to the vegan bubble thing. I think this is really important. I don't know whether is it time to go there because I think it's a generally.
well, I think the text thing there's a bit more to explore there, if I may,
Oh, okay.
because
I don't think so, but go ahead.
we gotta have some disagreement. Otherwise, it's not a very good debate, is it?
Yeah. No, we don't.
I mean, I guess I agree with a lot of what you're saying, and I've been there myself. I guess the thing I would push back on is I think those text threads are probably, but besides sending smoke signals to one another, I think it's possibly the least effective form of communication. And especially if we look on the disrupting cultural speciesism, if we're looking at some of those public threads where we're potentially outnumbered and we're just going to get piled on with all these basically anti-animal comments, depending on how you want to frame it. Is it possibly a risk that, I mean, I guess you mentioned, the opportunity to kind of build awareness about certain issues. Do you think it's possible that we actually, it's counterproductive and we actually are reinforcing the norm because we're
Yeah.
just
Well,
so
actually,
outgunned?
yeah. I think you raise a good. When you're talking about that particular type of group, and you mentioned the meat eaters versus and that, I think there's like 3 or 4 of those now, and some of them have been set up by the meat eaters, and it's just really a way of piling in and kind of taking the mickey out of veganism. I don't think they're particularly productive. And then you've got the issue of if you're talking to other vegans on other threads, you don't really know about how many, as it were, members of the public, to use that phrase, are there anyway. The public ones, if they're set up by the opposition, as it were, I think they might be a waste of time. I do agree with that, but I'm not sure. See, I'm not quite sure whether new vegans would go there, and you would probably try to discourage them from going there because they're not going to learn anything. They're not going to have a great time. They're just going to have their newly founded kind of beliefs attacked from all kind of angles, and also in a very kind of mocking way. So I don't think that's a very good experience. But then you've got the issue of the kind of mixed groups, if you like, if you can identify those, and also then I think I would say that most of the comments that I make are within kind of vegan groups, and so therefore it's within the movement. It's kind of movement issues that are going on there, I would say.
And again, if someone's closed-minded on that, it's weighing up our energy compared to how many people might be watching. I mean, Vegan Potterhead's kind of echoing this, that they engage a bit too much sometimes, they're saying, with those who aren't actually interested, which it's a difficult thing to do. I mean, like you said, on the street and in person, I mean, we have lots of opportunities to advocate, don't we? And we constantly have to do these heuristics in our head.
Yeah, but it's a balance, isn't it? I mean, you learn through experience. You think, well, this has run its course. There's no point in doing this. Just as you are on the street, and you actually kind of eventually going to go, well, I'm going to disengage now because there's no point. It's just the same as on social media. It's just that you don't get as many kind of social animal cues to it. That's all. But you have to learn it as you go along. But it's a question of balance. And I'm not saying engage with people 24/7 because for a start that would be exhausting. And that is another thing. Self-care is important in this because sometimes you can end up with a thread and it's exhausting, and then you've got it kind of playing in your head for a couple of hours afterwards if you're not careful. So you've got to be careful about which ones you engage in, especially if you've got the same people saying the same points. But again, I always think about the audience. That's a crucial factor for me.
Yeah, UK Vegan Family is echoing that looking for those open-minded conversations, and then I mean, blocking stuff that when it becomes non-productive, I think is a really good tactic to, like you say, self-care. And and
I think the point about being polite,
it does take a lot of energy, right? To dive into these threads. If we're already feeling run down and we run to these threads. I mean, they've also, Vegan Pixie Warrior is also saying that vegans taking over Facebook is great. Maybe it depends where we're advocating. I know I found Reddit to be quite a useful tool for text-based advocacy.
Yeah. Reddit is interesting, and we were talking about indie media, which we'll probably come back to as well. Kind of again in relation to the kind of vegan bubble idea. But the previous comment said about being polite, and I think that is important. Usually with me, I tend to the more rude and nasty the other person is, the more polite I am, and I certainly don't kind of get involved in a kind of slanging match. I don't think there's any point in that. And also, you're missing an opportunity to educate the audience. And if your focus isn't on the audience, then I think you're more thoughtful about what you say. If there's somebody just screaming and shouting at you, as it were, capital letters and all that, and you're really kind of engaged with that kind of battle, rather than thinking of the wider thing, I think you can get a bit lost in the discourse then. Whereas constantly keeping the focus on the audience, and then of course, if you think, well, the audience have gone now, have lost them or whatever, then it's time to move on. I just find it very helpful, even psychologically for myself, to think about the audience, because you can then almost like ignore the horribleness of the person who might be talking to you. And the fact
That's a strong point.
they're
That's a
calling
strong
you
point.
names.
I'd say along with that is also what we want to get out of the exchange. I mean, obviously, we're not trying to get everyone to sign up to a new vegan support program out of every exchange, but maybe they've made a claim that we need to, quote, eat animals to survive, and maybe the goal of that exchange is actually to present, the Dietetics Association.
But we're in a social movement as well, though, Jeremy, and that means that people are joining all the time, and they are becoming socialized. The way that people come into the movement and then get socialized by the movement is by watching people, seeing what they say, seeing what they write, and you just learn from that. And you tend to do that in terms of if you're in a city where there's several groups, you might turn up at one and you kind of find out what they're about, what do they say, how do they present themselves, and think, oh, this is not for me, I'll move on to another one. You do that in all kind of kind of phases of life and areas, arenas of life, and you just kind of find your place in it. But there's no doubt that we are socialized within the movement. So the new vegans are kind of vulnerable, I think, because if they end up in the wrong group, they're just going to learn stuff that isn't true for a start, or might be distorted and all that. And it's quite good to be able to correct it, I think.
Yeah, and I think another tactic used to for online advocacy, which maybe either in the live chat or after this is over in the comments, we can start a bit of a thread of what people do for their own online advocacy. I think it'd be quite interesting to hear from others. UK Vegan Family talking about looking for general posts on Facebook that's not specifically about veganism, which we'll talk about later. That vegan bubble.
I'm waving to Grumpy Vegan Grandad. I've started watching your channel, Grandad. So hi, how are you doing?
Yeah, because they seem to take a similar stance to you. That sounds like maybe they haven't been ground down perhaps as much as I have, and that they look at every interaction as a potential conversation. Which is I think if we have the energy, that's a good way to go about it. Because I have a friend similar to the UK Vegan Family's point, was actually looking for local grocery store posts such as Tesco's and Aldi and so forth, and just like something as simple as saying RIP on a post where they're advertising someone's body being sold, or whatever it is.
Jeremy, can you clarify what you mean by being ground down, and wouldn't a focus on the audience help you there?
It could. I appreciate that. I think for me, because I think the next thing we have on our list is content types. Because to me, the text thread is only one element of social media. I've actually, part of the reason I've moved away from the text-based comment threads is really focusing on creating video content that's animal-centric, that highlights the residents at my local sanctuary friend, and shows them as the unique individuals who they are. And I have a sharing strategy that I found quite successful to get the word out, where I'm literally, hundreds of thousands of reach just for a single post. So when I weigh the energy it puts, that it takes to do a post like that versus engaging in these text-based threads that can be quite draining and, harder to measure the outcome from, that's where I've kind of shifted, not entirely away, but a little bit away from the text-based thread. So maybe ground down's not entirely fair. I think it's just I'm assessing where my time's best spent, because we all have finite resources as advocates, be it time, money, or otherwise.
Well, I agree with you. It can be tiring, and it can just be draining, I think. And so I do understand that. I just think that you got to think wider than the person you're talking to, and that for me, if you like, I don't know if that's a trick, but it's a psychological trick on yourself. But it means that I can persevere then, I suppose.
Well, it's just changed here. Grumpy Vegan Grande has a good response to that. You can't get more ground down than ground beef. So that's a good one for me to remember, I guess.
Is that a grumpy point?
So Terry's making a point about free living beings videos being a good one to focus on. I've also started to look for opportunities on just general happy animal videos. On Reddit, there's a lot of groups for cows and chickens and so forth that aren't, very few of the individuals there would be vegan. So even dogs, cats, and if there's some type of bridge that we can build off of to start talking about all animals and respecting them and their rights, that it's good to be strategic and not, because if we could spend all day on social media, couldn't we, commenting? But good to be focused with our approach.
I would have thought that if you commented on the the videos about free living beings and everything, aren't you going to get a kind of, oh, look out, here comes the vegans type response? Isn't that what happens?
Well, I mean, maybe Terry can explain further. I think it depends. It depends how we go about it. I mean, in addition to where we're spending our time, it's how we go into those conversations. I mean, if we just go in and say you're a murderer type thing, that's one approach. But if we say,
it's not the best opening gambit, is it? You're a murderer.
But I mean, if we say something as simple as I think that's praising something they have said, and then bridging the gap to talking about the philosophy of animal rights. Even something as simple as, oh, that you're right, this video is great. I never saw the individuality of cows as much as this, or something like that, and just see where we can get going.
Funny enough, I mean, obviously, I don't subscribe to the idea that veganism is a scare word, but I do think it's preferable in your opening comment to talk about the philosophy of animal rights and maybe bring up Tom Reagan rather than talk about veganism, because veganism can kind of trigger people in that sense. But then, of course, if the conversation does get a chance to develop, that's when you can start to bring that in. So that's an interesting nuance in my own position, I think.
Yeah, it's kind of a good third point of communication. I know I use that especially on the street. Instead of, one person versus one person, and obviously versus isn't the best framing, but it does kind of become that way sometimes, doesn't it? Instead, if it's the two of you looking and analyzing the philosophy of animal rights and saying, well, the philosophy of animal rights says this, then you can kind of look at it together, and it's almost like you're trying to figure this out together.
Well, yeah, but interesting that you say that. You could apply that to social media too. In your own mind, is it best to think, I'm going to have a debate with this person, or I would have thought it would be preferable to say, I'm going to have a conversation with this person? And
I'm beginning to think you're not liking the name of our new series. The thing is, it rhymes. If you wanted a different name for the series, you need a different last name than Yates.
No,
with a last name like Yates, we have to have debates.
I love it. I love all your work, as you well know.
Oh, I absolutely agree. Because I think when we look at it as an adversarial confrontation, it's much less likely to end on some sort of mutually agreeable next step. It's much more, I'm right, you're wrong type exchange, and the more and more we can say, well, actually, I was tricked about this too, and just being honest and putting our cards on the table and saying,
it's interesting that, because that's actually one of the reducitarian critiques of vegan advocacy, is that the vegans are always trying to win, and rather than really kind of educate, it's kind of more like, because then you've got the then you've got all the clickbaity type titles, I destroyed meat eater, or and even that kind of counterintuitive, or this kind of, it's ironic, isn't it? Kind of meat eater destroys vegan type headline, and I suppose that is just to get vegans to click on that, I suppose.
Well, and to Nikki's point, I found this myself when I started to really when I read a book about communication that really got me excited to try some of the techniques out. Social media can be a great place to get started, because I think a text-based exchange is much less confrontational, or has the potential to be less confrontational. So we can actually try our techniques out. And it's at the same time, it's possibly more challenging because, to your point, we don't have body language and those other tells to kind of read from the person. So if we can have a successful exchange on social media through the text chat, I think we're pretty well prepared to have a real life conversation, and maybe it's a good training ground.
Yeah. Well, I'm forced to agree with you, even though I'm trying to figure out a way of not. But
Seems like we largely agree. I think, yeah, it's really kind of where we focus our time. Well, I think that might take us on to the vegan bubble, because I think Terry has echoed some of the same things that we're often kind of hearing a similar argument, but it does help to reflect on our approach and read it, like you say, from the audience's perspective, and how is a wider audience going to interpret the vegan response to a non-vegan objection.
It's trial and error, folks. You might see a video, and you might hear an interview, and you think, wow, that was really good, but you can guarantee that person's made some pretty shitty videos and done some mistakes in live TV or whatever. I mean, I did loads and loads.
Yeah, who would go live? I mean, that's just a complete mistake. You have no chance to edit it or take out all the mistakes.
It's really interesting.
I'm referring to now.
I know that. Yeah. Oh, you mean yeah. That up to that. But I mean, it's interesting from a press office point of view. The way it used to work is that when you were new to it and you weren't totally on top of what you wanted to say, you would like it if you're being recorded, because if you made a mistake, you can go, made a mistake there, take two, and they would have to edit out the mistake. And then once you get proficient at what you do, you preferred it live because they couldn't edit you then. And that means then that you could say what you want to say without fear of them changing the nuance of what you're saying and stuff. So it's a kind of that's probably a bit of a tangent, but there you go. That's for you, Tommy.
Tommy Tangent. Shout out to Tommy Tangent. Well, and I think here's an interesting advocacy tool, bridging social media to a live action, is doing a live stream while bearing a witness, and actually reaching out. Maybe UK Vegan Family, you can clarify when you say you responded to them. I don't know if that was on the public chat or actually personal messages, because I think anytime we can get a personal chat going, that whole thing about calling in versus calling out, people might be more receptive if it's a more private exchange. So, I mean, yeah, it'd be interesting to know how we approach that, because that's maybe another thing that's quite challenging when we go to movement issues.
It's a good idea to do a live stream whilst you're doing something else. We've got the technology. I mean, I used to go live on Facebook when we were setting up and when we were operating the vegan street or the the gazebos and stuff. And I mean, partly because I wanted people to see the physical size of the thing, to get an appreciation that this is way beyond the idea of just somebody stood there, with a fold-down table, because we deliberately wanted to go bigger than that. And so, but I said we certainly didn't do that thing about staging an interview. The kind of the thing that people like Jeremy Hess might have done and stuff.
Slip that one in there.
Yeah.
If mine were staged, they'd be much better, I suspect. Well, Nikki's got a fantastic point here, and I think this applies to both online advocacy, probably especially, but also in person. Is almost, I like to think of it like a 3-second rule. Almost like when we're shooting pool, it pays to just pause for 3 seconds and really think about what we're doing. And the point here, if they're rude, it's easy to fire back with that quick reaction type of response, but actually thinking about it from a non-ego perspective. And to me, that's the difference between kind of that advocating versus venting, because it's so easy to vent. I think we have a lot to vent about in this world, don't we?
Yeah, you like that point, do you, Jeremy?
Well, I'm suggesting I should be waiting longer. I think I know what you're getting at here.
I see you took it down before I could have a go, yeah.
Well, and I think also just this is another point around live streaming. It's something, as I think for all of us, it's about efficiency too, because live streaming, it's just there. There's no editing. There's no, okay, when I'm going to set aside time to get on my computer and chop it down. And like you say, I think with live content, hopefully people are a bit more forgiving, current live stream included, if there are a bit of,
what's on the screen now, Jeremy, so don't take it down. My vegan picture.
Sorry, what's that?
No. You're a very naughty boy. He's not the Messiah. I think this is raising the. I said, before we came on air, that there's potentially a kind of generational issue here. For example, if I think about my social media, I mean, on Facebook, I've got close to 5,000 friends, but I would guarantee that 99% of those are vegans, and so I don't really have non-vegan friends on Facebook anymore, and also not really kind of got family, in the sense that there's less of them nowadays, I suppose. But so I think that might be something to do with the fact that new vegans or vegans who have been in the movement for a relatively short time have still got contact with a lot of people, and that's why they might show material which there's no point in showing to other vegans. But there's an interesting thing, because I was saying before, I don't think I've ever showed Earthlings on my status in my wall on Facebook, because there's no point, because everybody on my Facebook will have seen it. I will show other things which I think is quite useful for vegans to see, unnecessary fuss or the home video, things that they're unlikely to see, the total liberation thing from Steve Best. Because I see it as educational within the movement, but I'm not really looking outside of the movement. And I do know from a vegan who's been vegan now for about 2.5 years, who's saying that a lot of their friends just unfollowed them. And I think that's a risk, that if you do kind of try to target them, they kind of suss that out very quickly, and then they start to. I mean, I've seen a few people saying, "Oh, my, some of my family have blocked me now because I keep posting vegan stuff, and it's upsetting them." So I think there's a generational difference.
It's strategic, isn't it? Because I appreciate that a lot of people are motivated by particularly graphic things, so there is a place for it. But yeah, if someone just hits that block button, and then you lose the chance to advocate to them, and indefinitely going forward.
You got to be careful
that risk
with the graphics, though. I mean, I think we all know this. I think everybody knows this. You got to be careful with the graphics. And I know the argument for using it, even within the movement. It motivates you and all that. In fact, I did a recent interview with Freedom of Species. In fact, it's coming out on Facebook, YouTube later on tonight. But when we talked at length about burnout, and kind of saturating yourself with that graphic imagery is not great. In two ways. It psychologically can harm you, and also it gives you a distorted view about humanity in general. And so you're tending to look at the worst of humanity, and if you do that all the time, I think it does kind of skew your idea about humans, and then that skews your idea about, are we capable of winning? Because humans are so horrible, we'll never do it, and that can't be good for a vegan activist.
Yeah, and as you pointed out during our the podcast we recorded yesterday, which keep an eye out for on Thrive Vegan World, around our audience is humans. So if we become deeply misanthropic, which I completely understand the temptation to do so, but if we can't connect with our audience, it's going to be much more difficult to connect with our audience. Because I think Nikki's reiterating one of my points that I shared earlier, is just to kind of walk away and think of something.
Then.
But really, I think almost just taking a moment versus just that kind of rapid fire response makes a big difference. And I think this is clarifying earlier around private messaging versus public messaging. To good to have a mix between the two of those, because perhaps it's worth talking about. I mean, I think when it comes to movement issues, I think a lot of people, it might be hard to reach out privately to some of these individuals. So then it's like, at what point do we publicly discuss the issues, or is it best to, specifically targeting those individuals or groups? I think that's a difficult one for me. I know I try to focus on the issues versus the groups or individuals themselves, but I appreciate there's a place for it.
Is that what you do? You actually PM people? Do you? You message people privately?
If I can, yeah.
All right, because I don't do that. What's the advantage of doing that?
Well, I mean, I think, for instance, if I had a major gripe with you, right now during a live stream probably wouldn't be the best place to air it with you. So I think it'd be better to have more of a private dialogue when we can, because I think, especially on, you know, your Facebook threads, people's egos are on display, you know, and if people feel like they're under attack, they feel like they need to defend themselves versus
So
a one-on-one private message.
about,
It's much, they can still put their guards up, but I think it's much less likely.
Yeah, but so you're talking about calling out and calling in that,
exactly.
Yeah. Oh, okay, yeah. Right.
But like I say, it's not always possible. I mean, you know, you can't always call in some of the people that, you know, they might get so many messages, even if they wanted to, they couldn't respond. So it's a difficult one to navigate for all of us.
So we're on to vegan bubbles then. I think this is a really important movement issue, because if we're just talking to ourselves, we're kind of not doing it. And this is why I focus on the grassroots, because anything that is a product of the movement should end up on the street, as far as I'm concerned, where you're showing it to your fellow citizens, which is, you know, try not to be too pompous about it. But I mean, the bedrock of democracy, or the bedrock of social change, is one citizen talking to another. Funny enough, it's one of the reasons why I really dislike these people who are trying to sign people up for things all the time. You know, because nowadays it used to be that people come up and they would actually come to you to get a leaflet off you because they wanted to see what it was all about. Now they're frightened because they think you're going to ask them for money, and so they often avoid you, you know. And that's the product of people being signed up for Amnesty International and this kind of stuff, and people being kind of hassled on the street, you know, hi, hello, kind of thing, you know, and all that. I remember a really weird thing when I was in Wales. This guy offered me a leaflet, and I took it, and he held on to it, and I held on to it, and we had this kind of took a war, and I was thinking, why isn't this chap giving me this leaflet? And I realized that he was trying to hold me there, and so I let go of it, and I said, look, you know, if you don't want to give it away in the first place, then, you know, and I walked off, because it was kind of new. That kind of style of things was new then, because I was just used to giving people information, and they would give it to you. You know, I talked in a recent show, didn't I, about we were involved during the miners' strike in 1984, and the miners, you know, would give us information, and we'd give them information, and we even had a charity football match with them and all that. But it was a different time in that sense. People weren't scared of each other, but that is the bedrock of what we're trying to do. We're trying to give information to people in a way that will resonate with them. You know, so anything that happens in social media, anything that happens on a save, anything that happens in terms of an investigation and in terms of footage, it needs to be on the street. Eventually, somewhere we've got to get it down on the street. You know, there's no point in it just bouncing around Facebook, because the chances are you're just showing it to other vegans, and that concerns me. And we need to find out ways of getting out of the vegan bubble, and that raises issues like independent media, which seems to have died, unfortunately. There was this, you know, you can Google it, indie media, and there was indie medias all over the world. I noticed that the British one, the UK one, is being archived now. The Irish one, we just had a look before we came on air. The Irish one is still running. There was one in Australia. There was all of the Indian one. There's all over the place. USA had a real big one. So there's the indie media type thing, which was populated mainly by non-vegans. So that meant it was a good audience for us to talk to. And then, of course, you've got the mass media. And I'm just wondering whether we need to have within the movement another focus on contacting the mass media. Even things like teaching other. I mean, we used to we used to do this all the time. We used to teach each other how to write a press release, for example, and you know how to do that. You know, the upside down story kind of aspect of it and all that. And I'm not quite sure that vegan groups reach out to the mass media very much. And the local media and the community media are really good places to go to. You know, because you know,
and social media, like we've been discussing. I mean, I think there's a pretty strong case. I mean, on social media, at least you can form your own message, and we can talk about whether that message is consistent and abolitionist in nature.
Well, I'm talking about the audience, Jeremy. Yeah, who are you transmitting to?
Yeah, and I know we've had a few dialogues around this. To me, the vegan bubble isn't as much of an issue as it may be presented here, and maybe this can get into the full debate phase.
It's a big issue. It's a big issue. If all vegans are doing,
I don't know that it is. I don't know that it is. I'll give you two reasons. I'll give you two
now.
I'll give you two reasons why it isn't.
Go on then.
One, I mean, I appreciate any stats need to be verified, but the whole 85% recidivist rate, I believe, is largely due to people not aligning with the ethics within animal rights. And I think until we, and the people that identify as being within the movement in vegan groups, I think are the most receptive to that ethical message. So I think if we can really reinforce that, we can drop that ex-vegan, as it were. I mean, one could argue, were they vegan in the first place if they haven't aligned with ethics? That's kind of a different discussion. But it's still good to reinforce that. And even for animal advocates, and if it's non-graphic and it's positive and really connecting advocates with the unique individuality with animals, and maybe sending the message in a way they're not used to. I think there's a lot of value in that. The point too, though, is I don't think we're just confined to this vegan bubble. When we get things to pop outside of it and go, a bit more viral, I mean, if we share to vegan groups, yes, you're right. Most of the people there are vegan. I'd argue a lot of them aren't. But even beyond that,
where are you popping to, Jeremy?
The thing is, if we can create content that motivates people, that people watch, they get an emotional connection, and they really resonates with them, and they hit that share button.
I'm asking you to specify how you get this material out of the vegan bubble. How do you do it?
Jump-starting it by sharing to vegan groups. But then, like I said, it's got to be the right kind of content, and there's a lot that can go into that, which is probably a different discussion. But if we can get other people, other vegans, or maybe non-vegans within these vegan groups to start hitting that share button, it's no longer the vegan bubble. I think once we start to hit a certain number, it's hard to argue with only 1% of the population being vegan that these thousands of people are all vegans. And we could look at specific examples if we want, but
no, I'll be honest with you. I hope I'm wrong and you're right, but I'm not sure.
Well, maybe the people watching can let us know what they think. I mean, do we think that it's an issue, sharing content within vegan groups, or do we think there's actually a lot of people listening there that could benefit from the message and possibly help to catapult that outside of those groups in addition to the people who are there? I'd be interested to hear what other people's responses are on that one. And just to catch up a little bit on the comments, it looks like you and Jennifer did some live marches that you were filming. So it'd be interesting to see if you got what kind of feedback you got from that. I don't know if you remember people watching, if it kind of charged them up and got them talking.
Say again.
Did you have a positive experience streaming live marches? Because that's a format we haven't really talked about. Obviously, the energy at those is quite high and quite a good way to bring advocates together.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, we used to film it. I don't think we streamed it, though. Maybe Jennifer can correct me if I'm wrong, which is it has been known. Maybe we streamed it, but we certainly filmed things, and obviously people are taking photographs of those things all the time. Again, it's interesting. Like a march is an interesting phenomena. I mean, it used to be one of the main ways to get the message out, because it's not now.
Yeah, to me, the marches are more about advocates connecting with each other, building that community, and inspiring each other. If we get a few people thinking about veganism and animal rights as a result, I'm all for it. But I think that's more of a bonus.
Oh, I think so. Yeah, I mean, can you imagine the kind of cohesive effect of the march before the age of the internet, when I mean, sometimes you would only see people 2 or 3 times an entire year, because you meet them at the national marches and stuff. And then you would do all the networking and, what's going on, what you're doing, I'd like to get involved with that and everything. All the stuff, which is, I mean, that goes into another plank of my position, which is we don't really need the big groups anymore, because we can do it in the grassroots, because we've got this. I mean, this is instant global communication that we're doing right now.
That sounds like debate number 2.
Yeah, I know, but this is the first generation to do this, Jeremy. This is very important. We are the first generation that can talk to the world, and any of us can talk to each other, and we can organize this way and all that. You don't have to be told what to do. You can do it yourself. It'd be nice to get a bit of cash in the hands of the grassroots, but I think that the movement now can, if you like, take the internet seriously and just dissolve its existing structure because it's not needed. This is the age of the internet. We can do the videos. We're doing the videos. We can do the live streams. We're doing them. We can produce the leaflets and posters. We've you know, in Dublin we've got the leaflets and posters all produced by ourselves.
Yeah, and I think my position would be we don't necessarily have to dissolve one to build up the
Yes,
other.
you do.
But maybe the viewers can let us know in the comments. Is that something you'd like us to have? I think we might have a heated discussion about that. We're dipping into our toes into the water here with this first ever debate episode, but that one could get a bit.
You're running away. Is that what you're saying?
Well, and Vegan Pixie Warrior has a great point that kind of echoes what we were saying about the marches, that the live streaming activism also helps to normalize it, because I think for people who aren't active, especially depending on the type of action, could be really curious what it's even all about, and if they're really a bit anxious about attending an event, that's a great way to bridge that. Yeah, and I think just catching up on some of these comments, I mean, I think we're pretty well caught up. So if you do have any questions, let us know what you think about the vegan bubble and also social media, how you approach it. We might wind this down to a close. I think we may have established a bit of ground. I think we kind of knew how each other felt on this issue going into it. It sounds like, to summarize, perhaps you're kind of more advocate on social media with the audience in mind, whereas I'm more kind of a hit and run, drop a comment, and kind of leave it there and not overly drain ourselves type approach. Do you think that's a fair summation?
Yeah, I think so, Jeremy. And also, I suppose my own experience of social media, and because of who I connect with, I suppose, is I don't think of it as a public arena as much as a movement place. So I kind of tend to think of social media as a way for movement to have a reflexive discussion with itself. And so that's kind of how I see it. I think I'm a bit different when it comes to something like YouTube. I tend to think that's a bit more public. But again, I'm not quite sure who watches our YouTubes. I mean, like,
I think to me, my experience, I think Facebook is probably the least likely to have a genuine conversation on. This is just my personal experience with especially non-vegans. I think YouTube, perhaps slightly better, because I think if someone's willing to watch a 3 or 5 minute video, let's be honest, that's pretty rare these days.
Yeah, but I'm not asking about the content. I'm talking about who is the audience on YouTube.
Well, I think the people who are willing to engage with that content versus it just coming across their social media feed probably indicates a slightly higher level of open-mindedness. Is my point. And Reddit further, I think that's a much more kind of genuine community I found. I encourage, maybe I can drop a link of one of I have a dashboard that can track posts that might be good to comment on.
Yeah, I think you might be right. I'm coming to think that Reddit might be a kind of version of Indie Media, and that might be an interesting one for advocates to explore. And I should do it more, I suppose, because I'm interested in talking to, outside of the vegan bubble, as it were. But I mean, again, for people to comment after we go, I'm really interested in this vegan bubble thing, because if I'm breaking out of it anyway just by some process, I'd be delighted. I just don't think I am. But you tell me. I mean, I'd love you to tell me that I'm wrong, because on this one I'd love to be wrong.
It's definitely a challenge. I agree it's a challenge. Maybe the degree to which it's a challenge is where I push back a bit on, because I think that is Spiffy has a very good point around this, that also within the vegan bubble is not just talking about veganism, but talking about people getting active.
Absolutely, yeah.
So if we can focus on that within the vegan bubble.
Oh yeah, but that's what I said. Movement issues within the vegan bubble, that's fine. I won't argue with that at all. I'm just wondering whether we ever break out of it, and how we do it. What is the process or the processes by which we can escape the vegan bubble? And I've suggested already indie media, community radio, that kind of thing, community press, and then the issue of the mass media, which is very tricky for social movements. And in some ways, if you confine yourself to social media and you don't go to mass media, that's understandable, because the mass media is a bit of a, I don't know if you can say this, Jeremy, it's a bit of a bear pit. you know, and you
Probably can't say that, Roger.
No, but you can get thrown, get thrown apart in there, you know. And so I mean, you know, some of the prominent spokespersons have had a kind of hard time during in the mass media because you just don't get people agreeing with you. You know, people are actually trying to bring you down, you know, right there and then on the spot, as it were. So it's a different experience.
That's kind of a case not to focus on it to me. I mean, Jennifer's echoing what we talked about earlier within the vegan bubble. That one challenge is the graphic footage, you know, that she's saying she can't watch. You know, and I wonder how many vegans actually disengage with social media as a result.
Yeah, well, Jennifer and I do a little series called Vegan Culture Jammers, and we did, I think, the 5th one we talked about that issue. So if you want to check that out, you go to my YouTube and then look for the playlists. I think it's Vegan Culture Jammers. Although I've got to sort it out. Apparently, I've got 2 there for some reason. But
yeah, I'm just. It looks like really great conversation in the chat because obviously we get to have our own conversation. But
well, read it out. Read it out.
well, I mean, it's just a great way to bring people together because I think we get to build a little bit of a community here, which is really nice to see. I think for all of us, we can always expand our advocate community. That's always a good thing to be able to do that. Well, I think this has been a good, successful first outing. What do you think? Debates with Hess and Yates. Do we keep this thing going? Maybe we talk about whether or not we need to get rid of the big organizations.
It's completely crap.
For the next one. You don't have any disagreements around that one?
I'm still trying to find things to disagree with you about.
I think we found a few during this one. People might have to watch closely for them, but I think they're there. But I think if nothing else, even if our views don't necessarily change, hopefully it's a good way for all of us to kind of think through these things. Because I think the more we continue to be mindful, the better advocates we're going to be.
I'll tell you one point I'd like to make, and this applies to the Animal Rights Show in the round. Is we want the best for this movement, and I mean I feel very passionate about this movement, and I mean I've been in it for more than 40 years, and I'm very sad about some of the things that go on in this movement, and some of the distortions and some of the rip-offs that go on and this kind of stuff. But I'm very passionate about the progress of this movement. I really want it to happen. You know, what happened there? Did you disagree?
I thought you were going to a dramatic close. Right, I was trying to. That's what we call a super zoom in the biz.
No, I just to be honest, I thought you cut me off. I thought I'm going to get him for that. I'm going to get him.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's what really excites me about the show. For those who are watching, please do keep an eye out for our Sunday show. That is our main show where we have the full team present and cover a lot more issues. We have a special guest panelist this weekend, actually, Mel Broughton, we're going to be talking about, violence against activists, as well as kind of how to respond to the claim of animal testing. So those are 2 big topics that I think we'll be able to get into a lot more in depth.
Yeah, it's going to be a goodie, folks. It's going to be a goodie.
So with that, we really appreciate everyone for joining us.
No, we don't.
We hope to make these more of a recurring thing.
No,
maybe spontaneously during the week, but especially those Sundays at 5 p.m. UK time. Keep an eye out, and we'll try to keep doing those. So,
yeah,
thanks, and we'll see you.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in and listening to us ramble away, folks. Thanks very much.
We'll see you next time. Bye.